Blood freezes at 20 below zero. I didn't know that before Korea. You'd be working on a man, trying to stop the bleeding, and your hands would stick to his skin. The blood on your gloves would turn to ice. You'd have to crack it off like red snow just to keep working. I was an Army medic attached to the 2nd Infantry Division. 22 years old, from a small town in Ohio where the biggest emergency was old Mr. Henderson's heart acting up. I'd trained for 6 months, learned how to splint bones and stop bleeding and treat shock. They gave me a bag full of supplies and a Red Cross armband and sent me to Korea. June 1950, when it all started. North Korea came across the 38th parallel like a hammer. We weren't ready. Nobody was ready. They pushed us all the way back to Busan, nearly drove us into the sea. Then we came back. Incheon, Seoul, pushed north almost to China. Then China came in. Winter of 1950. The Chinese came across the Yalu River, thousands of them, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Human wave attacks in the freezing cold, bugles blowing in the dark. They hit us at the Chosan Reservoir, and we had to fight our way out. Retreat, they called it. Fighting withdrawal. Felt like running for our lives. By the time I got there, spring of 51, the lines had stabilized near where they started. The 38th parallel. That invisible line that somehow was worth all this blood. My job was simple. Keep men alive long enough to get them to the aid station. Just had to keep them breathing, keep their hearts beating, get them on a stretcher and into a jeep. Simple. Except nothing about it was simple. My bag carried morphine, sulfur powder, bandages, tourniquets, plasma. Weighed maybe 20 pounds. Felt like 100 by the end of a day. I carried something else, too. Something heavier. The knowledge that no matter what I did, some of them wouldn't make it. That I'd have to choose. That I'd have to live with those choices. They don't teach you that part in training. My first call came on a ridge north of the Imjin River. April morning, cold, but not the killing cold of winter. We'd been dug in for 3 days, trading artillery fire with the Chinese across the valley. Then they came. Started with the bugles. That sound, as Christ, that sound, high and eerie in the morning fog. Then the whistles, then screaming, thousands of voices screaming as they charged up the hill. The shooting started. Our guys on the line opened up with everything. Rifles, BARs, machine guns. I was in the aid station, just a bunker dug into the hillside, listening to it all, waiting. Medic. First time I heard that word screamed in combat, it went through me like electricity. That's what you train for. That's your job. But hearing it for real, hearing the terror in it, I grabbed my bag and ran. Found him 20 yards behind the main line. Private Collins, kid from Georgia, 18 years old. Shrapnel had torn through his stomach. He was conscious, looking down at his own guts spilling out, making this sound, not quite screaming, not quite crying. Something worse. My hands were shaking, couldn't get them steady. All that training, all those practice dummies, and now there was a real person bleeding real blood and I was freezing. You're okay, I told him. Lie. I got you. You're gonna be fine. Another lie. I packed the wound with gauze, wrapped it tight, shot him full of morphine. His eyes were locked on mine the whole time, pleading, begging me to save him. Medic. Medic up. Another one. Then another. The Chinese were in the wire now, some of them making it through. Close combat, grenades, bayonets, men screaming everywhere. I worked on Collins for maybe 3 minutes. Then I had to make a choice. He was stable, relatively. But there was another man down, and another, and another. Triage. Save who you can save. I called for stretcher bearers and moved to the next one. Collins died before they got him off the hill. I found out later, bled out internally. Maybe if I'd stayed with him longer, worked on him more, maybe. But there were 6 other men I kept alive that day. 6 men who made it because I moved on. Because I chose them over Collins. That's what they don't tell you about being a medic. You play God every single day. Who lives, who dies, who you try to save, and who you leave behind. And you live with every choice. The cold was its own kind of enemy, worse than the Chinese sometimes. Frostbite would take men as surely as bullets. You'd see guys lose toes, fingers, whole feet. The cold would seep into wounds and make everything harder. Plasma would freeze in the bottles. Morphine would thicken and barely push through the needle. You'd have to warm it against your body first, waste precious seconds while a man screamed. We had warming tents for the seriously wounded, but getting them there, that was the trick. Jeep ambulances on those mountain roads, exposed to sniper fire, sometimes breaking through ice on the frozen rivers. I rode in the back of those jeeps dozens of times, crouched over men who were slipping away, trying to keep them breathing for just a few more miles. Lost a lot of them on those rides. There was a battle near the Punch Bowl in the summer of '51. Artillery duel that went on for hours. We took dozens of casualties, not from direct hits, but from the concussions, the flying rock and metal, men with their eardrums blown out, bleeding from the nose and ears, men buried alive in collapsed bunkers. I pulled 3 men out of a bunker that day, dug through dirt and timber with my bare hands. The first 2 were dead, crushed. The third one, Corporal Hayes, he was alive, but his legs were pinned under a beam. Took us 40 minutes to free him. 40 minutes of him screaming while we worked. When we finally got the beam off, both his legs were ruined, crushed below the knee, bones sticking through the skin, arteries severed. I had to tie off the bleeding, both legs. Tourniquet so tight he passed out from the pain, even with morphine in him. He lived. They took both his legs at the MASH unit, but he lived. I still wonder sometimes if I did him a favor. The burns were the worst to treat. White phosphorus from artillery, napalm from our own airstrikes when they came in too close. Flesh melting off bones. The smell of it, like roasted pork, and that makes you sick because you recognize the smell from cooking, and that makes it so much worse. Had a lieutenant get caught in a white phosphorus hit. Willie Pete, the guys called it. It keeps burning. You can't put it out with water. It'll burn underwater, burn through anything. You have to dig it out of the flesh, cut it out. I had to cut burning phosphorus out of a man's chest while he was conscious, screaming, begging me to stop. But if I stopped, he'd burn from the inside out. He died anyway. Infection. 3 days later. There was a medic in another company, guy named Jackson, from Philadelphia. Good medic. Better than me, maybe. He worked a full day treating casualties after a Chinese attack. 20 men. Saved most of them. That night, he walked out into the minefield. On purpose. Stepped on one deliberately. Nobody talked about it. Mental breakdown, they said in the report. But we all knew. We all understood. Some days, the weight of all those broken bodies, all those choices, all that blood, some days, it was too much. I thought about Jackson a lot after that. Wondered what pushed him over. Wondered how close I was to that edge myself. You can only see so much before something breaks. You can only carry so many dead boys in your memory before you can't carry any more. By late '51, the war had changed. No more big offensives, no more dramatic pushes north or south, just endless fighting over the same hills, the same ridges, the same worthless pieces of frozen ground. They'd name the hills by their height on the map. Hill 1052, Hill 983, Heartbreak Ridge, Bloody Ridge. We'd take them, lose 100 men doing it, hold them for a week, then abandon them, then fight for them again a month later. Made no sense. But sense wasn't part of it anymore. The peace talks had started at Panmunjom. Everyone knew it. We'd be fighting and bleeding and dying over territory we'd give back at the negotiating table. Men dying for political points, for bargaining chips. Try telling that to a 19-year-old kid bleeding out in your arms. Try explaining that his life was traded for a clause in a peace treaty. I stopped thinking about the politics, stopped thinking about why, just focused on the work. Next patient, next wound, next impossible choice. The Chinese used different tactics after the line stabilized. More infiltration, night raids, ambushes. They'd hit us in the dark, fast and brutal, then melt back into the hills. You'd hear the bugles, the screaming, the shooting, and then it would be over. 10 minutes of chaos that left 20 men torn apart. I learned to work in the dark, by feel. Couldn't use flashlights most of the time. Made you a target. So you'd be there in a foxhole, hands inside a man's chest cavity, trying to clamp a bleeder by touch alone while mortars fell around you. The rotation system meant new guys were always coming in. Replacements who didn't know the terrain, didn't know the routine, didn't know how to stay alive. They'd make mistakes, do stupid things, and I'd be the one trying to keep them breathing long enough to learn better. Most of them did learn. Some didn't get the chance. There was a chaplain, Father Murphy, who'd come around to the aid station. Catholic priest from Boston. He'd give last rites to the ones who were Catholic, pray with the ones who weren't. Good man. Kept us sane, some of us. He asked me once, after a particularly bad night, how I kept going, how I dealt with losing patience. I told him the truth. I didn't deal with it. I just pushed it down, locked it away, kept working, because if I stopped to think about it all, I'd end up like Jackson. That's not sustainable, he said. I knew he was right, but what else was there? My breaking point came in November 1951. Winter was setting in again. The cold was back. We were dug in on a hillside overlooking the Yokok-Chon River Valley. Quiet sector, they said. The Chinese hadn't been active there in weeks. We thought maybe we'd get some rest. They hit us just before dawn. Came out of the fog like ghosts, hundreds of them. Caught us completely by surprise. Overran the forward positions before we knew they were there. The casualties came fast, too fast. The aid station was chaos. Men screaming, bleeding, dying faster than I could work. I was triaging, making calls, trying to save who I could. That's when they brought in Danny Reeves. Kid from my hometown, literally from my street, lived 4 houses down from me. I'd known him since he was 6 years old. Used to play catch with him when I came home on leave. His mother made me promise to look out for him when we ended up in the same division. Shrapnel had caught him in the chest. Bad. I could see the sucking chest wound, could hear the air whistling through it with each breath. Pneumothorax, tension pneumothorax. Fatal if I didn't treat it immediately. But there was another man next to him, sergeant I didn't know, arterial bleed in his leg. He'd be dead in 3 minutes if I didn't clamp it. 2 men, 1 medic. Both would die if I didn't act. Only enough time to save one. I looked at Danny, looked in his eyes. He knew me, recognized me. Doc, he said, just that one word, not asking for help, just acknowledging me. I chose the sergeant. I worked on him first, clamped the artery, packed the wound, got him stabilized. Took me maybe 4 minutes. 4 minutes that felt like hours. When I turned back to Danny, he was dead. Eyes still open, still looking at where I'd been standing. I closed his eyes, put my hand on his face, and something inside me just stopped. I finished my shift, treated 12 more men that day, did my job, went through all the motions like a machine. But I was empty, hollowed out. The part of me that cared, that felt things, that made those impossible choices and believed they mattered, that part died with Danny. I wrote to his mother a week later, told her he died instantly, didn't suffer, told her I was with him at the end. All lies. But what was I supposed to say? that I let her son die so I could save a stranger, that I chose wrong, that her boy called my name and I turned away. After Danny, I stopped seeing faces, just wounds, just problems to solve. Body after body after body, and none of them were people anymore. Just meat that needed fixing. It was the only way I could keep working, the only way I could survive. I rotated home in March 1952. 11 months in Korea. Felt like 11 years. They gave me a commendation, Bronze Star for Valor. Told me I'd saved over 100 lives. Made it sound like I was a hero. I threw the medal in a drawer and haven't looked at it since. Coming home was strange. Everything was the same. Same streets, same houses, same people living their same lives like nothing had happened. But I'd changed. Changed so completely that I didn't fit anymore. People would ask about Korea. What was it like, they'd say. Like they were asking about a vacation. They'd heard about it on the news vaguely. Some war in some country most of them couldn't find on a map. The Forgotten War, they started calling it. Nobody cared. We were fighting and dying, and nobody back home even noticed. I tried to go back to normal life. Got a job at the hospital in Cleveland. Started medical school on the GI Bill. Did all the things you're supposed to do. But I can't be a doctor, can't do it. I thought maybe I could, thought maybe working with sick people would be different from working with wounded soldiers. But the first time I was in an OR and there were complications, when the patient started bleeding and everyone started moving fast, I froze. Just completely froze. The sounds, the smells, the pressure, it all came back. The aid station, the screaming, Danny's face. They had to pull me out of the OR. Failed my surgical rotation. My advisor suggested psychiatry. Said maybe working with minds instead of bodies would be better for me. He didn't understand. Can't work with minds either. Can't work with people. Because every time I look at someone in pain, every time someone needs help, I see all the ones I couldn't save, all the ones I had to choose against. I see Danny. I went to see his mother. Had to. Couldn't avoid it anymore. She lived 4 houses down. She hugged me, cried, thanked me for being with her boy at the end. Said it gave her comfort knowing I was there. I couldn't tell her. Couldn't say the words. Just nodded and left and haven't been back to that street since. The nightmares are constant. Not every night, but enough. I'll be back there in the aid station with 2 men bleeding out and only enough time for one. Sometimes it's Danny and the sergeant. Sometimes it's Collins. Sometimes it's people I saved, but in the dreams I make different choices and they die instead. I wake up and my hands are shaking. Sometimes I can still feel the blood on them. Warm and sticky and freezing all at once. Father Murphy wrote me a letter last month, asked how I was doing, said he hoped I'd found peace. I wrote back and lied, told him I was fine, adjusting well, moving on. Truth is, I don't know how to move on. How do you move on from playing God? From choosing who lives and who dies? From letting a kid from your neighborhood bleed out because triage said to save someone else? The war ended, officially, in July. Armistice signed. Fighting stopped. We're right back where we started, at the 38th parallel. Like 3 years of dying didn't change anything. 36,000 Americans dead, for a stalemate, for nothing. I saved 100 lives, they tell me. 100 men who went home because of what I did. I should be proud, should feel like it mattered. But all I can think about are the ones I didn't save, the ones I left behind, the ones I chose against. Danny's face is burned into my memory like white phosphorus. Can't dig it out, can't cut it away. It just keeps burning. They call it the Forgotten War. Maybe that's for the best. Maybe some things should be forgotten, but I can't forget. Can't forget any of them. Every face, every wound, every impossible choice. I came home from Korea in 1952. My body did anyway. But part of me is still there, still in that aid station, still looking at Danny, still making that choice over and over again, still wondering if I chose right, still knowing I didn't. We saved lives. That was our job, our purpose, our reason for being there. But who saves the medics? Who fixes us when we break? Nobody. We just carry it. All of it. Every death, every choice, every face. And we never come home. Not really. We're still there,